Thank you again for joining us for Rhythm, Music, and Movement, Building the Foundation of Executive Function with Dr. Lynne Kenney. Executive function is really the brain's control center, located primarily in the prefrontal cortex, the front part of the brain. When it's working well, kids can focus on what matters, they can make thoughtful decisions, and they can manage their impulses. When it's not, we see the opposite. We see distraction, we see frustration, we see emotional outbursts and struggles with follow through. And that leaves many parents and teachers feeling, sometimes frustrated and often discouraged. The key is that executive function is built through experience, and two of the most powerful builders are movement and music. So, yet today's children move less and spend more time on screens than ever before, and they're missing out on the rhythms that help their brains organize and keep them regulated. So, that's why today's session is so very important. Dr. Kenney is going to share how rhythmic movement and music can strengthen executive function and give kids the tools they need to focus, regulate, and feel more confident in learning in their daily lives. And she'll make it practical. So you're going to leave with ideas you're going to be able to start using right away. So I'm especially excited to introduce Dr. Lynne Kenney. Dr. Kenney is one of the nation's leading pediatric psychologists with decades of experience helping children, families, and schools strengthen focus, self-regulation, and executive function. What makes her work so impactful is that she blends neuroscience with education. She turns that into very simple, practical strategies anyone can use. She trained at Massachusetts General Hospital, Harvard Medical School, UCLA, and Pepperdine. And her methods are now used internationally to support children's learning and behavior. She has authored multiple books, with her next, Move More, Learn More, coming out through Teachers College Press next year in 2026. Dr. Kenney is also a pioneer in rhythm and music-based interventions, widely used to improve executive function, self-regulation, and learning. She's a certified provider of the listening program, integrating music listening therapy with her movement-based approaches to further enhance focus, flexibility, and emotional balance. Beyond her impressive credentials, what really stands out is Dr. Kenney's ability to make this work practical and accessible. Parents, teachers, and professionals walk away from her sessions not only inspired, but with clear ideas they can put into practice right away. Dr. Kenney, it's an honor to welcome you.
Oh, I'm so pleased to be here, Alex. Thank you warmly for inviting me.
Yeah, this is a real treat. And I want to jump in. You've spent years helping children and families with focus, self-regulation, and learning. And I'm really curious, when did you first make the connection between rhythmic activity, music, and executive function? Was there a moment where it just all clicked for you?
Yeah. So, I think the first place to start is that I do have a master's degree in physical education. And so I've always been about sports and athletics. And in 2009, I was volunteering at a local school, just helping kids with math. My friend Sue Milano was working 2 days. I was working the other 2 days. And I noticed with these children who were having trouble with math, they were in first grade to fourth grade, there was like diminished motor coordination, diminished rhythmicity, diminished timing. Their posture and core control was all kind of, slightly challenged. And I was like, what is going on with that? So one day we were in the library. I'll try to make this a really truncated story. We're in the library. It's like our second or third session. These are great kids. I know these kids personally. I've been, knowing them for years. And we're doing worksheets. And I look at them at the end of one of the days, I think it was Tuesday, and I said, "Are you guys having fun?" And they were like, "No." I was like, "I'm not having fun either. Next time, Thursday, I'll meet you out behind the school and we'll play on the playground." And the kids were like, "Really? Are you going to ask Mrs. Zupke?" And I was like, "Yes, I'll get it all cleared. We're good." So I brought poly spots. I brought hula hoops. I brought balls. I brought bean bags. And we started rhythmically doing our math. It was a whole method that I ended up writing around 2013, but it was called play math. And basically, when we incorporated rhythm, their math grew exponentially. And I was like, so then I continued to do that in clinical practice and at the schools. And then I started really noticing in our kids with dyslexia, ADHD, and autism, even more motor coordination challenges. And I actually wrote you, and I don't know if you remember this, but it was around 2014. And I said, Alex, what am I looking at with this diminished timing? And you said, you're looking at the field of auditory neuroscience. Well, I'd already worked in cognitive science, developmental psychology, kinesiology. I never even heard of auditory neuroscience. You sent me a whole box. I totally devoured it and have paid attention to that literature for years and years and years. And it turns out that I'm not the only person who thinks this. There are people around the world, Usha Goswami, Kate Williams, Raina Gordon, who, Angela Fawcett, they've really noticed for a while that diminished rhythm, tempo, and timing appears to be a correlate in many neurodivergent children. And when we improve their rhythm, tempo, and timing, we improve their cognition and self-regulation. So that's how it all started.
It's an amazing beginning. And Lynn, I do remember because that was on X, formerly Twitter, where we had a little conversation going. And one of the things I appreciated is with your extensive academic background, your absolute curiosity about learning more and doing better for the kids you work with. And that just struck me with immediacy. And as I think back to this experience that you had 5 years prior, it's interesting how we often underestimate rhythm.
Mhm.
We hear it in the music that we enjoy. We feel it when we move, but may not be aware of it. But we don't realize it's shaping the way the brain organizes our thought, our attention, and our behavior.
Well, when you think about it, Alex, we often, we interventionists, be us school counselors, OTs, PTs, we often get referrals for learning and behavior, but there are four precursor skills. I call them the developmental pillars on which learning and behavior rest. And all four of them are rhythmic. Your sensory motor platform is rhythmic. Your language platform is rhythmic. Your cognition is rhythmic. And your social relational skills are rhythmic. And we have evidence of that just as you and I are volleying. We're having a little volley back and forth as we're talking. We're also needing to self-regulate because this is a very exciting topic to us. And that is all that whole self-regulation process, the linear sequential thinking process, and the taking turns, that is all rhythm.
Yeah, it's all rhythm, and that's where co-regulation, right, is about rhythm. So before we go further, I just want to take a few minutes to introduce the listening program because it connects directly to everything we're talking about with rhythm, music, and executive function. So for those that the listening program is a new idea, the listening program, otherwise known as TLP, is a neuroscience-based music listening therapy method. It's been used by more than 1 million people worldwide for more than 25 years. It's built on decades of research in music and auditory neuroscience and brain plasticity. What makes it unique is it goes far beyond ordinary music. Each module that you listen to is acoustically modified, specially recorded, arranged, processed with very precise changes in tone, frequency, and timing to strengthen the way the brain processes sound. Now, let's pause on that idea of auditory processing because it's central. Auditory processing is how the brain interprets, organizes, and responds to that we hear. When auditory processing is efficient, sound supports our memory, our attention, our thinking, and our regulation. But when it's inefficient, the child loses track of instructions, they struggle to retain information, they can become overwhelmed in noisy environments and dysregulated. And it's not a matter of the ears, it's not a hearing issue, it's a brain organization issue. And the good news is there are things that we can do to help reorganize that brain, like the listening program. Research shows that music-based interventions can improve executive function, skills like working memory, attention, cognitive flexibility, and self-regulation. TLP takes that foundation further by structuring listening sessions in a way that functions like a brain workout. So each session begins with a warm-up to prepare the brain, moves into targeted stimulation, and then closes with a cool down to return the listener to a calm, focused state. Sessions are short, just 9 minutes if it's in time, 15 minutes if it's the other TLP programs, level 1, spectrum, or achieve. But the consistency over time is what drives that lasting change. And what do people experience when they do it? Well, across studies and in practice with families and professionals, we see improvements in attention, memory, communication, regulation, and so much more. It's also been shown to support sensory processing, particularly in reducing auditory sensitivities. For someone who feels flooded by background noise, TLP helps the brain filter and organize sound more efficiently, making daily environments more comfortable, safe, and manageable. So TLP is for people across the lifespan, from very young children that are learning and developing self-regulation skills, to adults that want greater focus and stress resilience, and older adults that want to strengthen memory and their cognitive health for longevity. So it's used in home schools, clinics now in over 40 countries. So while TLP uses music, it's much more than music. It's a structured, research-based method, giving the brain the input it needs to process information more effectively. And that foundation pairs beautifully with the rhythm and movement strategies that Dr. Kenney is going to be sharing with us today. So, Dr. Kenney, in your work as a pediatric psychologist, you've explored how rhythm, tempo, and timing are tied to neurological differences in children, as you've shared with these 4 pillars. It's a really fascinating connection, these intersections, and probably new for many that are joining us today. Can you share why those rhythmic patterns are so important for executive function and what they reveal about how the brain is working?
Wow, what a big question. And you got a lot of good questions in the chat, so we'll address those because people are, what ages do we use TLP in the different programs for? I use them all ages, 4 to 85. And how do we incorporate your listening programs and my motor movement programs, and why? Okay, so let's start with the why. So in education and in psychology, and even a little bit in OT and PT, we're really not taught that the brain and body of the human being is highly musical. It's actually true across animals as well. And when I use the term musicality, Alex, I'm talking about the fact that rhythm, tempo, and timing are 3 modalities that help us to think more clearly, make decisions that are pro-social and helpful. And those 3 things, rhythm, tempo, and timing, help us move smoothly throughout the world. And we're often needing to either co-regulate or self-regulate in order to really utilize the rhythm, tempo, and timing efficiently. Now, when you think about executive function skills, there are over 32 executive function skills. And if you, as an example, listen to music, dance to music, do rhythmic activities like Tai Chi, drumming, horseback riding, swimming, all of those activities require not only lots of coordination, but they require lots of thought. And I actually, right now, I'm taking dance because I've been writing dance programs for little children. It's a long story, but I've been taking dance in order to understand it better. And the thing that I hear myself say the most is, this is so cognitive. When we move in a coordinative, especially rhythmic way, it's a very cognitive process. So that I like to think of the cognition over motor. So I say to kids, it's kind of like a fraction. Right now, we're going to either increase the C, the cognition, or we're going to increase the M, the motor, but we're only going to increase them enough that we can efficiently perform our activity aiming toward automaticity. And what are we doing? We're using focused attention. We're using sustained attention. We're using cognitive flexibility. If we switch, if I start a movement on this side of the body, then I switch to this side of the body and I switch, body da ba da da da, bum bum. That's all requiring cognitive flexibility, sequencing, attention, working memory, lots of self-regulation. So when we use the musicality within the human being, we can really help them to think more clearly, behave more pro-socially, and self-regulate in a highly complicated world.
There is a lot to unpack there.
I know.
So, and you use a word I love, which is that automaticity.
Mhm.
And you can learn so much by watching a child or an adult and how they're organized rhythmically, motorically, and in their executive function based on how cortical their movements are. Are
Mhm.
they, our families work with brain injured children. We're working on how do we get from cortical to non-cortical movements so we do it fluid and with automaticity because we know that that motor foundation supports everything else in our being. So, what are some clues when you observe a child's movements, Lynn, that just based on their movement, that there could be some executive function challenges?
Well, it's interesting because like going back to what we were talking about very, very early, you were saying that I've incorporated a lot of science into what we do. And what I really want to encourage practitioners to do, and I did this, is watch what the children are doing, form hypotheses, and then look for the research to support or refute the hypotheses. And that's kind of what happened for us. I was like, I see children come into my office and bump into the doors. I see them, I've got toys, I see them reach without thinking or asking. I see them playing with one toy and then just dropping it and going to another toy. That is cognitive disorganization. And so I can watch their play movement, their process, and then I can do things like if you saw my office, I have two big yoga balls where we're doing our cognitap drumming. And I have a balance board. If I want to increase some complexity, I can have them cognitap, drum, and march. So I have a kind of a systematic, developmentally appropriate way of increasing the cognitive or motor demands. And when I'm seeing that children can't catch a rhythm, can't move on the beat, and or can't move to my tempo, even I'll move with the kids' tempo and then I'll try to slow them down or I'll try to speed them up. When they don't have, I would call it that musical fluidity, it starts to tell me there's more than just language or cognition going on. There probably is some motor. And what I wanted, this is so fascinating. Um, the developmental coordination is a specific diagnosis diagnosed primarily by occupational therapists, and it's basically fine motor challenges, posture challenges, motor challenges, core challenges, and balance, which is very important in all of the ages. What many clinicians don't know, Alex, is that the coexistence of developmental coordination disorder and neurodiversity is 50 to 95%. Approximately 80% of the kids in our intensive dyslexia program have motor coordination challenges, and most of them meet criteria for DCD, developmental coordination disorder. The cool thing is that even if you don't have OT, like a lot of schools I go to, they don't have access to OT. You can do marching rhythmically, drumming rhythmically, just playing or swaying or swinging in order to introduce what lots of OTs do in their more formal work in order to start to build posture, weight shift, core strength, balance, motor coordination. You can use your musicality, like we just got a note from a piano teacher on the chat. You can use your musicality in your music room by just as an example having them sway ba dee da 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 ba ba da da and stop boo doo 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 doo. Let's sway again. It's just so natural, Alex, to implement this in everyday life, at home, in school, in music classes, and in clinics.
So I love that. So just incorporating rhythmic musical activities into the things that you're already doing to have fun with it.
Mhm.
And, there is something about that that's changing the brain, right? So, kind of, you're talking about maybe an unstructured, playful way to incorporate some of these ideas day to day. And how do you see structured approaches like the listening program kind of fitting into that picture in your practice?
Well, upon reflection, I use the listening program for either calming or priming, depending, or I'll use Sleep Genius. I've got lots of different individual stories. I use In Time as well. The system actually sits like 4 feet from my desk, so I'm pulling it out all the time. And while there are clinicians who use TLP, for the full 24, 30 hours as a formal treatment protocol, which is very effective, I tend to use it for brain priming. So like a few weeks ago, I had a child in my office. I want to start with the fact that if a child is dysregulated or inattentive in my office, the first thing I'm going to do is try to slow them down. And I'm not going to talk to them. I'm going to move with them. So as an example, with this specific child, I put them on the yoga ball and I ask them which way they like to move. I always say, do you want to be a scientist? Because I want the children to co-direct what it is that we're doing. The child is moving back and forth, buddy. I'm slowing them down. And then I say, as scientists, shall we add a little music? Would you like this headphone, give them choices, or this headphone? I put the headphones on. Like everybody, I have preferred songs and preferred things. And I say, we're going to experiment now. We're going to push it. Is that good? Does your brain like that one? Okay. All right. We're going to stay with that one. Okay. And I always tell them, Alex, when you're done listening to the music or moving your body, all you do is raise your hand and we'll
Mm.
stop. So I provide and I mean, I could give you I've got another kid about 3 months ago. Did you know that children who have developmental coordination disorder and sensory challenges often get carsick? I did not know that. I learned that from the OT.
Regulation.
The day my child comes in and gets sick right in the front, and I say to the OT, should they be going home? Are they not well? And they said, oh, no, no, this is just sensory. And I said, okay, Sleep Genius. I put them in the little library. We've got a tiny little library with a little couch. And I always, like every other good clinician, you engage them and say, do you want to be a scientist, or do you want to calm your brain, or shall we calm your body? Let's make some decisions together. Put Sleep Genius on, and they went to sleep because their body just needed to calm down. So everyone uses your programs differently. I tend to use them for alerting the brain, calming the brain, and I often do add them with some motor movement that is more rhythmic, that not complicated. Like we might be drawing. We're never doing anything complicated.
Well, I love what you're doing is you're giving these kids a chance to reset from the inside out, and they are a active participant in that process. There's not a demand placed on them. You make it a dialogue, and they very much, I imagine, feel very safe and in control of that process based on the options that you're giving them. So I think that's a beautiful approach.
Mhm. And then they'll come and ask for, once, Alex, just like an adult, once you find a way, like I use swimming and Pilates to stay regulated, right? Once you find a method that really works for you and helps calm your central nervous system, that's your thing, whether it's running or boxing or whatever that thing is. And so in my office, especially when we're doing like coordinative, slow, rhythmic movement, they'll tell me, I would like to listen to this kind of music. I would like to use these kinds of headphones. And then I like that they're kind of, they're directing what their body needs. I want to tell you something that's related to this. I was in a school last week and I was teaching the teachers that, and I mentioned this to Mandy when we got on the phone, on the call. Imagine you're in bed, you get out of bed, you go and you sit and you eat, or you get on your digital technology, you're a child. You get in the car, you go to school, you sit. Okay, that is just a recipe for disaster. So I was talking with this school not only about 0 hour, letting everybody walk, but adding crab walks or bear walks or heavy work proprioceptive types of activities to high quality soothing music, like as an example, TLP, which they can play in the background. And this teacher said to me, oh, but one of my children is just going to be a gorilla the whole day. And I said, oh, your child needs to be a gorilla? And they were like, yeah. And I said, okay, well, maybe we just need to let them be a gorilla all the way around the track until they slowly can get to a slow pace of movement. And it's my personal belief that if I introduce the music, the calming, high quality music, at a point where the child has sufficiently released they've gotten their kind of sensory feedback, and now their brain is saying, okay, I'm starting to be ready to calm, then I think the music, my experience, is that the music will facilitate moving them into a self-regulated state. So now they can go do their work. And I just tell you that story to see, does that resonate with anything that your other clinicians tell you?
Yeah, it's very, very consistent, especially with the OTs that are, really tuned in to that.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And that, that makes me think I'd love to maybe segue more into some of the neuroscience, which you've, done a deep dive in since our first conversations 11 years ago. And, when kids are struggling with, rhythm and timing, it's not just about being offbeat. It's about how the brain is organizing movement. So can you talk a little bit, from the neurological vantage point, and especially looking at the cerebellum, which we haven't tapped
Mhm.
into yet,
Mhm.
how rhythmic movement and music help build the automaticity that we've been talking about?
Mhm. Well, the first thing I want to tell you is what Javier Cardenas, who wrote the NFL concussion protocol, told me about 10 years ago in his office. He said, Lynn, we know this much about the brain, just this
Amen.
much. So, amen. So, we're really, really learning. And let's just imagine, Alex, that we're doing an executive function talk in 2014. And I would say, where do executive function skills lie? And everybody would say in the frontal lobes. And that is true. If you have an infarct, you're probably going to get impulsive, or you might lose some language. Things can happen. But the thing is that your executive functions are controlled from your subcortical structures, your cerebellum and your limbic system, up to the frontal lobes. And the brain works together as a whole unit in order to implement your executive function skills. So that's kind of where automaticity comes in. The cerebellum is not just for movement. The cerebellum is tied to language, it's tied to cognition. And when you have a well-functioning rhythmic cerebellum, then the structures that rest on it are freed up um, to do better, to learn and grow and behave with greater ease. I'm always focusing on ease of function for my children. That's how I decide. Am I going to send them for a language intervention? Are they coming OT? Are they coming to me for drumming and rhythmic movement? Are they going to get some cognitive skill coaching? It's all got to be about their functionality. And so there are great books about this. Masai Ito probably wrote the first one, Cerebellum, Fawcett, and there's lots of people who talk about the role of the cerebellum. But it's very important to understand that the cerebellum is highly tied to cognition. In fact, some of our colleagues who are participating, the most densely packed neurons are actually in your cerebellum. And when you have like reflex challenges and reflexes that aren't integrated, a lot of that comes from your brainstem, which is even beneath the cerebellum. So this part of your body is very important. And it's my clinical belief that when we engage our subcortical structures in a calming, smooth, fluid way, we provide opportunity for the cognitive centers of our brain to be released of high demands so that they can now focus on other things. So let's just use attention as an example. Your vestibular system is directly tied to your attention. And your programs are really good for the vestibular system because you have a lot of surround sound. When you can calm and balance the vestibular system, then you have a more attentive brain. So the last thing I'm going to do if somebody's not attentive is ask them to sit down. If anything, I'm going to ask them to stand up, and I'm going to move with them slow to ba da 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 da, and then let's hold it. Now you lead, we go slow. So that's kind of the importance of the cerebellum, the subcortical structures, and we'll know more over time. We're just at the beginning of the literature, but you know, all of our thinking is not just in our frontal lobes. It's in our
Well,
body too.
well, and it's important because it really speaks to the absolute importance of early movement for our children, right? And providing those opportunities to be on the floor, to move and be motivated to move, because that's when we're organizing that brain from the bottom up. And what you're describing is, neurological function is a bottom up and a top down dance. It
Mhm.
is that processing, that integration of that, and the speed and the timing of that make all the magic happen, right, in our life, and can make things appear to come so easily, but they're so complex underneath. But the beauty is addressing them doesn't come with complexity. Addressing them comes heavily through rhythmic movement and through music. So I'd love to hear maybe just a couple of stories, more stories, Lynn, of clients that you've worked with, maybe a little baseline of where they were, what you did, and where they landed as a result of that.
It's interesting because I thought you were going to say a different word. I thought you were going to say the word simplicity, because that's where really a lot of this comes to. Like making decisions about what interventions you're going to use is a very data-based kind of cognitive clinical task. But when you actually do the interventions, simple is good.
Absolutely.
And, so when I'm choosing, am I using, I mean, it's not just the TLP programs. I've got other programs too, like Melodia out of Paris. Or am I going to use in time versus TLP? Or am I going to use, I tend to use combined on uh, in time because I really like all the sound. Or am I going to use Sleep Genius, which really is designed for sleep, but is beautiful for self-regulation. So as I'm deciding those things, I'm looking at how is their balance, how is their posture, how's their coordination, how are their hand skills? Should I be using sound while I'm also doing drawing, maybe on my Procreate? Are they showing some auditory processing deficits? Are they having trouble with sound discrimination, which when kids have phonological challenges, they often have? Are they needing vestibular work and or proprioceptive work while I'm doing some of these activities? So when I got Vital Neuro, I did start using it the most. I actually really love Vital Neuro, even though all the programs are good. And I found that with my most common referral is about a 4 to 9 year old ADHD boy. That's what I've worked with for years and years and years, even though I work with all kids. And when I can put Vital Neuro on them, I only use it with 5 and up. I called Mandy about that. But I use it with 5 and up. And when I can get the Vital Neuro on them and have them look at the screen, the self-regulation and the calming happens, I would say, in under 5 minutes. And
Beautiful.
then I can go do my work. So you didn't ask me this question, but you said, how do I kind of combine these and what are my stories like? In my office, I have a little, it's a little circle and it's got little triangles. It's like a clock kind of. And it's got colors. And so before most of my kids come in, especially when I haven't seen them for a long time, they're kind of new, I will I will color code different activities. So I'll say, oh, if you spin the spinner to red, we might do the listening program. If you spin the spinner to yellow, we might do Melodia. If you spin the spinner to purple, we might do Activate. If you spin the spinner here, we might do Cognitap, Lap, all these sorts of things, Popple, all these different activities. But I've already chosen for the children before they get there. And then they spin, and I'm always hoping that it's going to land on one of the music programs so that I can calm their systems before we do the other things. And I have this collaborative process with them where I say, listen, if we land on a color and it's an activity that you'd rather do later, we are in a relationship. We can talk about that and move things around. So sometimes I'll kind of be chatting a child into, do you think it would be nice to put the headphones on and do a little drawing on the Procreate before we, as an example, have a lesson on the attention engine or before we do our math? So the reason I say all that is that for everyone on this call who's very experienced, what they know is that the decision making is like an art. And you make all of these decisions based on the child's presentation in any given day and what it is that you think they're needing at that time.
Yeah. So for, someone that's maybe a practitioner, a parent looking at this through a new lens after today's conversation, where, just practically speaking, with the tools that are available in their person or in their immediate environment, what's a good starting point to kind of get a baseline of where a child's at and to begin to guide them through rhythmic and movement? Is there a basic strategy, a basic curriculum or framework that they can be thinking about?
Well, it's interesting because in our staff meeting the other day, we identified a child who actually probably didn't need rhythmic movement. They actually probably need proprioception first before rhythmic movement. So I like to, not for every child, we don't necessarily have data. So just watch the child, let's say while they're sitting at their desk or they're eating a meal. What do they like? Can they feel their mouth? Do they know the food's going in and going out? Are they particular eaters? Do they get tummy aches? Are they spreading all their things all over the place? Are they rather organized? Are they seeking proprioceptive feedback? I mean, a lot of times I'm in a classroom and teachers will think that somebody's naughty. And I'm like, no, that kid is sensory seeking like crazy. I just want to go do buttons on them and put them upside down in a downward dog right this second, because I know that's going to work. What's their vestibular development like? How are they receiving visual cues? Are they too overstimulated? You've got to kind of ask all those developmental questions, I think. And I used to have this conversation with Dr. Ann Alexander, like, where do we start? Do we go to OT, PT? What if we're just doing in-home interventions or teaching parents how to do things? I would say, look at the sensory, language, and cognitive systems that are working well for your child and look at what's posing them challenges. Behavioral expression is simply an expression. It's just showing what beneath is not working. So I wouldn't try to manage the behavior. I would like to intervene around usually the sensory or the auditory or the gustatory or the visual or even the interoceptive challenges that the child is facing so that we can help them be a whole, healthy, well-functioning, comfortable child in their own skin. So there's not an easy point of entry, but I think that if you start with the developmental pillars, it's going to guide you better than if you're going straight to behavior. That's my humble opinion.
Yeah. Lynn, do you have kind of a favorite exercise or sequence that you use with your clients you'd like to share with us?
Sure. So, um, the pattern that I start with the most is, okay, so there's two things to say about this. One is that generally we're moving in 4/4 time. So I'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2 as an example. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I can do it anyway. I can do it on drums. Last week I did it on a big yoga ball. I can do it on our bodies. I can do it on the floor. But just getting, we walk and move in 4/4 time. We talk in 4/4 time. So just to get them to ba 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 dee da ba ba da 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 dum. So I'll often just do right, left, ba da dee da ba dee da da ba da da da. And that will often be a beginning pattern, and then I'll have them add patterns and we'll use Cognitab or something so that they can read the stimuli, things like that. Yet for this conversation today, I actually think that using 3/4 time would really be beneficial because then you're alternating right side and left side. So as an example, I might have a child put their hand up and I might go 1, 1, 2, other side, 1, 1, 2, other side, 1, 1, 2, which side now? 1, 1, 2. Or I might hold their hands and just go 1, 1, 2, just tiny 1, 1, 2. Stuff like that where you're, using oscillating across the right side and the left side of the brain, and or you're using paradiddles, which would be a little more complex. Those are probably the kinds of patterns that I use most often everywhere I go.
And thank you for that. And what do you find is kind of a nice duration for those patterns then?
Short, brief, a minute, 2 minutes. I mean, I'll do 5 minutes of like Cognitap on the drums because I've got these Like there's 16 beat cards and I have approximately 18 cards that I've written. And so if a child comes in and they've got pretty good motor cognition, then I'll have them mix and match the cards, and that could last 5 minutes. But honestly, what I'm doing in the real world, if I'm in a school and they say, hey, this child is having some trouble with regulation right now, can you kind of model for the teacher what to do? I might ask for permission to hold the child's hand and then simply walk backward, slow, slow. Let's pause and look around. Can you find the color red? Where is it? There we go. Okay, let's walk again backward. Here we go. I'll just try to hold the child, touch the child, pat on the child to slow their system down.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I just think, what it's so easy to understand when you describe it, and it's
Mm.
accessible. And I think that that's important. I think so often as parents and practitioners are thinking about interventions or strategies or approaches, that we can make them maybe too complex in our minds, but actually in application, it can be very, very simple.
Just whispering to a child is a great strategy. We get a child that's really elevated. Hey, are you going to come over here? Are we going to play? And then they'll look at you and they're like, I think we have a lot of questions. I know it's been a smorgasbord. We've talked about a lot of different things because we love this topic. And in Move More, Learn More, of course, we spent thousands of hours writing it, and it's with 12 international authors, Mike Kazala and I, and Mary Stefan and Olivia Markin helped as well. But there are over 50 activities in that, and we'll be making videos and there'll be handouts. So I'm hoping that over time it won't be such a smorgasbord and you won't have to have a clinical mind to actually do it. You'll be able to use something like Move More, Learn More and go, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. I might hang out here for a while and do this more. That's kind of our goal for 2026.
Well, and we'll be sure to share with our audience when the book comes out and where to get access, and maybe we can come back and talk more, at that time. And we have had a lot of just wonderful questions come in. So, Lynn, do you want to free form and grab some
Yeah, let's
coming
do
in?
it. Yeah, you ask, I'll answer. Oh, there's lots. Ooh.
We've had all kinds that have come in. So, one for a piano teacher, how do they incorporate these ideas into their lessons?
Well, people who are already musical, this is way easier to do. Like every time I talk to a school and there's a music teacher there, they're like, what? I totally relate to this. I would simply say, remember that when you think about your musicality, you think quarter note, half note, whole note. Add some movement to that. You know what I mean? Quarter note, ba dee da doo da. Now we're gonna hold it. Ready for 3. Everyone counting with me? We're going back to quarters. Da, ba, da. That sort of thing is just so easy to incorporate. Just attach movement to your notes. And even I love to combine slow, slow, quick, quick, slow, because you're alternating ba da 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 boo, boo, boo. So that's a really good way to do it too. Just as they're walking in, or imagine you've got your little trumpets, your whoever's ba ba dee da ba da 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 ba ba. Here we go, everybody. We're coming in.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And then going to what you shared and how you use some of our programs in TLP, you can do a listening session as a primer to also further get that child into that mode or that adult for their lesson. We've had another question. How do you convert 4/4 time to metronome BPM?
Okay, so this is such a good question. And there's another related question.
Yeah.
When do you use African rhythms and other rhythms as well? Okay, so this is all one personal taste, okay, or knowledge base. Some of you might have more experience in African rhythms, or but this is the thing. BPM is tempo. And so I tend to think, am I moving slow, 50 to 85 beats per minute? Am I moving quick, 85 to 120 beats per minute? Am I moving fast, 120 to 140 beats per minute? If somebody's working 120 to 140, I'm trying to get them to slow down. And I teach all around the world, and I get asked, and I did train in metronome, interactive metronome, only level 1. I thought it was fascinating. But people always say, should I use a metronome? Should I use a metronome? You've got to remember, you can entrain to external stimuli and internal stimuli. In neurodiversity, I prefer that children, if they can, begin to entrain to internal stimuli. I want them to feel, as an example, the felt sense of slowing down. I want them to feel when they're starting to climb agitation mountain and they're getting dysregulated. So while metronome is very good and definitely, you can use it, I don't lean to metronome or even music first. I would rather drum with the child and use myself or another peer to entrain personally. I find that more effective because I don't want them relying on the external beat. I want them to rely on the internal beat.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So, how do you provide a simple explanation to a school psychologist about this topic? Other than having him watch this webinar, which would be a recommendation, share with your this webinar when the replay becomes available in the next few days. But how do you approach helping them understand what we're discussing here?
Well, I co-wrote one of my books with a school psychologist. So I know the school psychologist totally can get this. Her name is Rebecca Comizio. I think the bottom line, I think it's back to that, we often think about behavior and learning and I always go like this. We think about learning and behavior. And the thing is that there are all these developmental foundational skills underneath learning and behavior that need to be intact in order for you to behave or learn well. And I was just at a school a few weeks ago and I was teaching a staff and I said, among these pillars, sensory motor, language, cognition, and self-relational, if any one pillar is really like below the 30th percentile, it's going to pull on the other pillars. So that's one thing. The other thing is that we can move cognition with stimulation. Now, we might just move it for 15 minutes, but I have personal experience moving someone's attention, as an example, from the 39th percentile to the 65th percentile through joy and play and rhythmicity and dance and collaboration. The thing is that to really train attention in a brain, you've got to build the neural pathways, and that takes myelination and takes time. But what I would stress to a school psychologist is that the data that we see is not written in stone. And these kids are highly neuroplastic, and we can move them a lot in the moment and in the long term. And the ways that we do that best are by integrating tools of the brain and the body, not simply looking at the frontal lobes.
Very, very different topic. As we see young adults that, in my observation, are moving less and less than they ever have and are less physically active and more connected to screens and sometimes multiple screens simultaneously. What do you see are the consequences and implications?
I used to be more flexible around the consequences than I am now, to be honest. I was like, in moderation. The thing is that the data that's coming out is that, kids are spending 6, 8, 10, 12 hours on screens, and there's not a lot of evidence that it's good for your brain. So even though it might sound kind of silly, I'd rather, if I were coaching my own kids, I would say, Olivia, go back to the 70s. Play on the floor with your kids. Don't buy them lots of toys. Don't buy lots of digital media. Take the time to put your phone away. Play with them at the table. Play with them on the floor. Build with them. Draw with them. Sing with them. Do rhymes with them. Read with them. All of these developmental skills that we used to have developmental preschools we could refer to all the time. Now I can't find one in the whole city of Phoenix. It's like everybody thinks you need to sit in order to learn, and our children are getting worse every day. So jump rope, play sports. They don't have to be organized sports. Just go back into your yard and turn on the water and play and dig and garden, and we all have to get back there. And it's interesting, this isn't for this topic, but we spend billions of dollars in school on digital technologies. so our kids not only look at screens at home, they look at screens at school. And that's not, we are agricultural beings. We were meant to, comb the earth and look for berries and make huts. And we need to, we need to go back a little bit.
I mean, 8-year-old boys aren't supposed to sit in a chair in a classroom for 7 hours a day.
It's
If they,
unbelievable.
if they don't, they're ADHD, right?
And it's no criticism because I work with a lot of teachers
Yeah, I
and
know.
they're under
Yeah.
tremendous pressure and stress as well. And I know you weren't criticizing them, but
No, it's not.
like
They're doing.
we parents and we clinicians have to, like, we got to model
Yes.
playing, and we just got to model it, putting our phones away, you know. I'll tell you, in my own personal life, routinely people will say, I've been trying to get a hold of you. Where are you? And I'm like, well, my phone is off. How about that?
Thank you.
All
Thank
right,
you.
so many other questions. One was, how do you do this for younger children? I just taught 0 to 5 in Lynn County and Benton County in Portland, and I did this whole rhythmic program on the belly and side to side. And so you apply this with littles by doing rolling on diagonals and listening to your music or TLP or whatever it is, and holding hands and going side to side, doing lots of singing in school, doing lots of padding and rhyming games. That's what I think we do 0 to 4, and we've got to do it a lot.
So let's go to the other end of the age spectrum. As we're aging and we
Uh-huh.
prevent neurocognitive decline,
Hmm.
neurodegenerative diseases, how important is it that we stay active in music and movement? And what are some activities?
Well, it's really critical, and I'm not the only one who says it. I mean, you can open all sorts of podcasts. Um, I would say that moving an hour a day is a minimum, and it doesn't have to be high intensity. Like I was telling Mandy, I walk the first thing for 22 minutes, then I work for 2 hours, then I swim for 45 minutes, then I work for 2 hours, then I either go to Pilates or weightlifting, and then I go to the office. Now, you've got to have time to do that, but you've got to make the time. Like if I can't walk at 6:30 in the morning, then I'm going to get up at 6 in the morning. And I'm probably going to bring the children or the grandchildren with me. And if they're too tired, I'm going to put them in a bike. If we don't move, then we really negatively influence our cognition.
Yeah.
So, and everybody knows that. It's hard if you don't like movement, that kind of stinks. But if you think every step improves my cognition, and find friends to do it with, you know, and please don't wait till you're 70. Like start now. Start now. Just take a little 22-minute walk, get in the sunshine first thing in the morning, have some protein, and start there.
Love it. That's a great way to start the day. Fantastic. So we've had a huge response to this topic, and these questions have been fabulous. So everyone, thank you for helping us co-regulate and being part of the conversation. It's really stimulated some great ideas. For you, Lynn, right now, what's the biggest question that you're searching for answers to in your work as it relates to this topic?
Kelsey just said play is not superfluous. And my biggest question is, we have the science. I just, I integrated over 300 articles when we wrote our book 10 years ago, and now we've written a whole nother book. My biggest question is, what's the resistance? What's the resistance to being in a relationship, playing, laughing, moving? What is getting in our way? And when we can figure that out, and some of it, I think, at least for me, is inertia. Like I have to get up and say, go. Don't open the news. Don't, you got to go. The sun is waiting. Put your sneakers on. But so that's what I'm wondering, like why we really have the science, Alex. Music, movement, play, they build stronger brains for everybody. Um, what's our reluctance?
I think that's a great question. I truly don't know the answer because I think the resistance has grown in a way, even though the awareness has grown, and we're a little frozen.
Well, now everyone here is an ambassador, and
Yep.
we can all role model, and we can do it happily. And Patrick just said that, not Patrick, thank you, Patrick. Desiree said standardized testing gets in the way. Yeah, we have to make some changes. I mean, I get emails all day long and get invited lots of places. So I know a lot of schools and a lot of entire districts care about play and movement and music and art. So we have consensus on that. We just have to all model it more, I believe. Thank you for having me. Everyone's saying thank you, and
Well, I'll
thank you for
wind this up then.
participating.
Yeah, thank you for participating. And Dr. Kenney, thank you for your wisdom, your experience you've shared with us today. Your passion is clear. You embody what you teach, and I just love that about you. So for those that want to connect further with Dr. Lynne Kenney, you can follow her on Instagram at Lynne Kenney. That's LYNNEKENNEY, or visit her website at lynnkenney.com. To explore the listening program, how it could support you, your family, or the families you're working with, visit us at advancedbrain.com, email us at info@advancedbrain.com, call us at country code 1-801-622-5676. You can follow us on Instagram at Advanced Brain Technologies for ongoing updates and resources. Dr. Kenney, thank you again for sharing this time with us, and for everyone that joined us. Make it a great day.
Yeah, have a great day, you guys. Thanks for all your comments. Have a beautiful day. Bye, Alex.
Thank you.